It started with a scream. Not a horror movie scream, not the kind that makes teenagers hurl popcorn in sticky theater aisles, but a real, gut-ripping, throat-burning scream, the kind that can only come from a man watching someone die and being helpless to stop it. The scream belonged to Jake Morales, a paramedic with arms like cinder blocks and a mustache that screamed, "I used to play bass in a 2004 ska band." He wasn't supposed to be on shift. In fact, Jake had already clocked out, picked up a gas station burrito, and was halfway through a rerun of Walker, Texas Ranger when the call came through. Something about a seizure at a gated community named Evergreen Point. Now, Evergreen Point wasn't your average neighborhood. This was the kind of place where all the lawns looked like they'd been manicured by Disney animators and where the residents treated the HOA board with the same reverence some folks reserve for the Pope. The kind of place where a plastic flamingo on your lawn could result in a fine, exile, or both. Jake didn't want to go. He really didn't. But the kid who was supposed to take the shift had food poisoning, and Jake was only 10 minutes away. He sighed, tossed Chuck Norris into limbo, and revved up the ambulance like it was a Batmobile with a moral obligation. By the time he arrived, the sun had just dipped below the horizon, bleeding orange and red through the sky like a bad omen. A middle-aged woman wearing a matching velour tracksuit flagged him down with the urgency of someone who just realized her HOA dues might not be tax-deductible. "He's in there," she shrieked, pointing at a perfectly beige house. "He's shaking, like one of those inflatable noodle men outside car dealerships." Jake, unbothered by dramatic metaphors, grabbed his kit and ran inside. The patient, a man in his 60s, was collapsed on the floor, convulsing violently, foaming at the mouth. Jake didn't waste time. He dropped to his knees and immediately went to work. Airway. Breathing. Circulation. His fingers moved like muscle memory, honed by years of chaos. He radioed for backup, requested advanced meds, and reassured the man's panicking wife that he'd done this before. And that's when the cavalry arrived. But not the kind you want. From the hallway thundered two figures clad in dark blue uniforms, tight, aggressive, and soaked in self-importance. The letters, HOA Security Enforcement, were emblazoned across their Kevlar wannabe vests. They looked like mall cops with delusions of grandeur, except one of them had a taser, and the other had sunglasses on. At night. The one with the sunglasses sneered. "Sir, you're trespassing. This is private property." Jake barely looked up. "This man's dying. I'm saving his life. Call an ambulance if you want." "Oh wait, I am the ambulance." The taser guy stepped forward, puffing out his chest like a confused peacock. "You didn't enter through the front gate. That violates Evergreen Point Entry Code Section 9, Subsection B." Jake blinked. "Did you just quote a subsection while a man is literally foaming at the mouth in front of you?" "Yes, and you are now officially in violation of." "Bro," Jake cut him off, "he's seizing. Not sneezing. Move out of the way before I have to treat you for a concussion." Sunglasses guy stepped forward, putting a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Big mistake." Jake shrugged him off and returned to stabilizing the patient, but that moment, that one moment, ignited something in these self-appointed enforcers. Maybe it was the disrespect. Maybe it was their shared Napoleon complex. Or maybe it was the intoxicating rush of power that only comes when your badge was printed at Kinko's. Either way, it ended with a snap. The taser fired. Jake didn't even scream. His body just jerked once, hard, and then slumped over like a marionette with cut strings. His fingers, which had been stabilizing the patient's airway, slipped off. The man convulsed harder. The room filled with chaos, shouting, crying, the sizzling hum of the discharged taser still hanging in the air like a war drum. Jake hit the floor hard, face first, twitching. The patient stopped moving. The kind of silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the dead, suffocating silence of something gone horribly wrong. The wife screamed. Jake, semi-conscious, tried to move, but his muscles weren't obeying. His limbs felt like jello. His brain was scrambled, the electricity having made mincemeat of his nerves. He could still hear. Barely. "What the hell did you just do?" someone yelled. "Protocol," muttered Sunglasses. "He was saving my husband." There was crying. Begging. Maybe even prayer. And the distant wail of a real police siren, finally approaching. But for Jake, it all blurred together. His eyes fluttered. His vision dimmed. Then, black. The next morning, the HOA released a statement. A statement. Not an apology. Not a confession. A one-paragraph memo slapped onto their website's homepage next to a recipe for gluten-free banana bread. It read, "We regret the unfortunate incident involving unauthorized personnel and confirm that Evergreen Point Security followed protocol in preserving neighborhood integrity." Preserving neighborhood integrity. As if Jake had tagged a wall with graffiti or parked facing the wrong way. As if the life he tried to save was just an inconvenient speed bump on the road to well-manicured conformity. The local news picked it up like chum in the water. The words, "tasered paramedic," trended for 72 hours. Everyone had an opinion. Twitter threads popped off like wildfire. Reddit detectives uncovered HOA board members' LinkedIn pages and real estate licenses. Facebook moms drafted furious comment paragraphs with passive-aggressive emojis. The kicker? The patient, Mr. Leonard Barnes, died. Declared dead at the hospital 27 minutes after Jake was tasered. The official cause, uncontrolled seizure activity, respiratory arrest. The unofficial cause, 2 idiots with tasers and an overinflated sense of duty. Jake, meanwhile, was suspended from duty, standard protocol, they said. He spent his recovery on painkillers and rage, pacing his one-bedroom apartment with a limp and a Vengeance playlist on repeat. Lots of Linkin Park. A little Green Day. And yes, one moment of ironic Rick Astley. Because if he was going to be emotionally devastated, he might as well get Rick-rolled. By week 3, a lawyer showed up. Her name was Cassandra. 40, fierce, and dressed like Elle Woods had a baby with Olivia Benson. She was holding a manila folder thicker than a Harry Potter box set. "I saw the footage," she said, stepping over Jake's pile of discarded pizza boxes. "Let's sue these suburban stormtroopers into next year." Jake raised an eyebrow. "There's footage?" "Oh honey," Cassandra smirked. "This is 2025. Everyone's doorbell has a camera now. Including the one directly across the street from the HOA clubhouse. We've got a full 4K cinematic view of your taser takedown. Wide angle. With audio." Jake blinked. Was I heroic?" "You cried a little, but yes. Very heroic." Jake sat down. Slowly. He looked at the folder. Looked at her. "So what's the plan?" She grinned like a wolf in heels. "Oh, Jake. The plan is war." And just like that, a man who only wanted to finish his burrito and watch Walker was about to become the accidental face of a legal rebellion. Because somewhere between a dying patient, a taser-happy HOA, and a neighborhood that looked like a Stepford cult had a baby with Pinterest, justice had taken a coffee break, and Jake Morales was about to wake it the hell up. 3 days after Cassandra's visit, Jake stood outside the gates of Evergreen Point, staring at the rows of identical beige houses like they were enemy fortifications. The iron gate, embossed with swirling vines and pretentious gold lettering, clinked shut behind a passing Lexus. Jake's fingers curled into fists. He hadn't come to start a fight. Not yet. But something had been gnawing at him. The video, the lawsuit, even the public outrage, it was all static until he stood here again, looking at the place where a man had died under his hands while two tin-pot tyrants played traffic cop. A tremor ran through his right hand. Not from fear. Not entirely. The doctor had said it was residual nerve trauma from the taser discharge. Could last weeks. Months, even. Jake wasn't sure which was worse, the physical reminder, or the boiling sense of impotence every time he remembered how easily they'd brought him down while he was trying to save a life. He turned to Cassandra, who stood beside him in a sharp navy suit and low heels that still somehow gave her a commanding presence. She didn't fidget. She didn't blink. She stared at the gate like she could burn it down with sheer force of will. "You're sure about this?" Jake asked. She gave him a sideways look. "Sure about what?" "Poking the hive." Cassandra smirked. "Jake, I'm not poking it. I'm kicking it over and suing every wasp for emotional damages." They walked together to the community board office, HQ of the HOA, epicenter of bureaucracy wrapped in fake smiles and passive-aggressive newsletters. It was housed in a stucco building with columns that screamed Roman Empire cosplay and a fountain that bubbled with filtered smugness. Inside, everything was too clean. No dust, no fingerprints. The air smelled of lavender and legal disclaimers. A receptionist with lacquered nails and a frozen smile looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Cassandra said sweetly. "We're here to speak with Everett Knox." The receptionist blinked. "He doesn't take walk-ins." "I know," Cassandra replied, producing a letter with a golden seal. "But he's just been served." The woman's expression twitched for half a second, just a flicker, but it was enough. She took the letter like it might be ticking, glanced at the name, and muttered into a phone on her desk. A few minutes later, Everett Knox emerged from the back office. He looked exactly like Jake remembered, 60-something, silver hair slicked back, a face permanently etched into a smirk that thought it had won before you'd even sat down to play. "Mr. Morales," he said, voice smooth and rehearsed. "And Ms. Lowell, is it?" "Cassandra," she said coolly. "Let's skip the pleasantries. You're being sued for wrongful death, unlawful obstruction of emergency services, and assault with a deadly weapon." Knox's smirk faltered for less than a second before resetting like a poker player who just lost a hand but knew the deck was still rigged in his favor. "We acted according to the security protocols ratified by the residents," he said. The paramedic entered without proper clearance. "The paramedic was saving a life," Cassandra snapped, "which is covered under both state and federal emergency responder statutes." "But let me guess, you never read those?" Jake took a step forward, ignoring the shake in his leg. "You killed that man." Knox's expression darkened. "Watch your tone, Mr. Morales. The situation was regrettable, but security followed the procedure. If you're implying criminal negligence." "I'm not implying it," Jake said, voice tight. "I'm accusing you of it." The room chilled. Cassandra pulled out a second folder. "You'll be receiving subpoenas soon. Body cam footage, internal communications, security training records, even HOA meeting minutes. And every resident with a camera doorbell within 50 feet of that house. I'll be knocking. Residents here value their privacy. They won't when they realize you let a man die to protect lawn decor policies." For the first time, Knox didn't reply. He simply turned and walked away, his silence a slow retreat. Back outside, Jake exhaled. That went better than expected. Cassandra didn't smile. We're not done. Not even close. That was just the introduction. Jake tilted his head. There's more? Oh, Jake, she said, walking to her car. There's always more when people like that are involved. Later that night, it came. Not a threat. Not a break-in. Something quieter. Meaner. Jake's landlord called at 8:27 p.m. Hey, man, sorry to bother, but I've got a weird one here. Someone from the HOA legal counsel at Evergreen Point contacted me. Said you were being combative and causing legal headaches. They implied, without saying it outright, that your name on the lease might be problematic. Jake sat in stunned silence, cold dread pooling in his stomach. They're trying to get me evicted? I'm not saying that, the landlord replied awkwardly. Just, maybe tone things down. I mean, I like you, Jake. But I don't want this property blacklisted from future buyers or, flagged. Jake hung up. 2 hours later, someone keyed his car. Deep, deliberate scratches carved into the driver's side door like claw marks. Cassandra came over in the morning. When she saw the damage, her mouth became a tight, controlled line. They've started, she said simply. Jake didn't ask who. He knew. The lawsuit wasn't just a legal battle. It was war. A quiet war. A war of whispers, leverage, and intimidation tactics. They wouldn't come at him with fists. They'd come with bylaws and backroom threats. He watched as Cassandra took photos of the car. She was already texting someone, likely a forensic contact or her private investigator. Jake wasn't sure. All he knew was that she wasn't rattled. He was. That night, he opened his laptop, pulled up the video footage again. The moment the taser hit him. The moment Mr. Barnes stopped moving. He paused it on the frozen image of the wife's face, horror twisted into a silent scream. He couldn't let it go. Not anymore. He called Cassandra. I want to speak to the wife. She hesitated. She hasn't responded to my outreach. Try again. I need to hear it from her. There was a pause. Okay. But brace yourself. Guilt isn't the only thing she's carrying. The next day, Cassandra arranged the meeting. Mrs. Barnes lived in the same house where her husband died. The curtains had changed. The bushes were trimmed lower. A "for sale" sign leaned discreetly by the garage, partly hidden behind a hydrangea. She was younger than Jake expected, early 50s, maybe. Pale, tired. When she opened the door, her eyes didn't light up. They only narrowed. Jake removed his cap. Mrs. Barnes. I'm sorry for your loss. She stared at him a moment. Then stepped aside, wordlessly. The living room was immaculate, untouched since that night. The carpet had a new rug covering the spot where Leonard had fallen. I shouldn't have let them in, she said suddenly. The security guys. I told them you were helping. I begged them not to interfere. Jake shook his head. It wasn't your fault. She looked at him, and for the first time, her voice cracked. They told me, afterward, that if I spoke to the media, they'd freeze my husband's death benefits. Said they'd tie everything up in litigation for years. His pension. The insurance. Jake's blood ran cold. They're monsters, she whispered. They come to the funerals with casseroles and fake tears and then threaten widows behind closed doors. Will you testify? Cassandra asked gently. Mrs. Barnes wiped her eyes. I already did. Quietly. Anonymous deposition. But, Yes. If it goes to court, I'll speak. I have to. Someone has to. Jake left the house with a new weight in his chest. Not just anger now. Not just guilt. But responsibility. As they drove away, Cassandra looked at him. They made one mistake. Which was? They let you live. Jake looked ahead. The gates of Evergreen Point were shrinking in the distance. But the war was just beginning. And this time, he wasn't coming alone. Jake barely slept. His dreams, when they came, were a tangle of static and sirens, of bloodless faces and blinking lights. Morning arrived without permission, spilling pale sunlight across his apartment floor. Cassandra was already texting before he'd brushed his teeth. It's starting. They filed a countersuit. Defamation, trespassing, emotional distress. Classic bluff. Designed to shake us. Don't flinch. Jake didn't flinch. But he did feel it, the unmistakable tremor of escalation. This wasn't just a civil case anymore. The HOA was going on the offensive, and they were using every legal trick they had to bury him beneath paperwork, costs, and fear. Cassandra met him at a downtown cafe later that morning. Her laptop was open before he sat down, screen filled with case files, email threads, and financial records. She didn't look tired, but Jake could see the toll. Her jaw was tight, her fingers curled like talons around her coffee cup. They're not just bluffing, she said. They've hired Bartley and Finn. Jake blinked. Is that supposed to mean something? Cassandra tilted her screen toward him. It's the law firm megacorporations use when they want to destroy someone slowly, methodically, and within the bounds of the law. These people don't just fight cases, they punish people. Jake leaned back in his seat. I don't have money for a legal brawl. You don't need it, she said. You've got me. And we have something they don't, public sympathy. The footage alone has reached over 2 million views. People are angry. Angry doesn't pay for subpoenas. No, she agreed. But a crowdfunding campaign might. It felt like a stretch, but within 24 hours, the campaign was live. The headline was brutal in its simplicity: paramedic punished for saving a life, help Jake Morales fight back. Donations trickled in. Then poured. Journalists called. Podcasts invited Jake to speak. Cassandra prepped him for every appearance, every word. She knew how to shape the truth without breaking it, how to make Jake's story a weapon sharper than any lawsuit. But the more visible he became, the deeper the retaliation cut. Jake's brother, David, called one night from Portland. Man, your name's showing up in background checks. I just lost a client 'cause they said I was related to that radical paramedic. Jake swallowed. They're targeting my family now? Looks like it. Some article quoted your medical academy instructor out of context. Said you had a hero complex. The hits kept coming. Anonymous emails. A burner number texting veiled threats. Then came the code inspection. 4 city officials showed up at Jake's apartment building with clipboards and citations. Fire code violations that hadn't mattered in 10 years suddenly became urgent. Jake confronted his landlord. They're using the city against me? I didn't say that, the landlord said, not meeting his eyes. But maybe you should think about relocating until this blows over. Jake didn't relocate. He reinforced his locks. At the heart of it all, Cassandra remained the immovable object. She responded to every legal blow with a counterstrike. When the HOA tried to seal internal memos, she filed for court-ordered discovery. When they accused Jake of defamation, she cited public interest exceptions. She knew the law like a blade and wielded it with surgical precision. But even she wasn't immune. One afternoon, Jake found her standing in his kitchen, holding a thick envelope. "They leaked my private records," she said, voice flat. "My bar admission exam history, my divorce filings, even my father's military discharge." Jake felt a surge of rage rise in his chest. "You still want to keep going?" Cassandra folded the envelope and slid it into her bag. "They're trying to make me quit. That's how I know it's working." The real break came when a whistleblower stepped forward. A woman named Leah. Mid-30s. Shaky voice on the phone. Former security contractor at Evergreen Point. "I was on duty the night Barnes died," she said. "They told us to hold off the paramedics unless someone authorized it from the board." Jake's pulse pounded. "You mean they planned it?" "No," she said quickly. "But the policy was clear, no emergency personnel enter without clearance. Even in life-or-death cases." Jake put her on speaker so Cassandra could hear. "Why now?" the lawyer asked. "Why come forward?" "I can't sleep," Leah admitted. "I told my supervisor what happened that night. He said if I opened my mouth, they'd blacklist me. Security companies share names. You go against an HOA like this, you don't work again. But I kept the radio logs. The internal emails. I saved everything." She sent the files within an hour. The proof was damning. A documented chain of command that confirmed a standing order: delay medical responders unless formally cleared by HOA leadership. Even if someone was dying. Cassandra's eyes were alight as she read. "This is criminal negligence. And we're filing it tomorrow." But they didn't get that chance. That night, someone broke into Jake's apartment. Nothing was stolen. But the place was torn apart, drawers dumped, files scattered, his laptop missing. Jake stood in the doorway, fists clenched, breathing hard. Cassandra examined the damage with clinical detachment. They were looking for the whistleblower files. Jake turned to her, face hard. "They crossed the line." She looked up. "No. They reveal just how scared they really are." The next day, Leah vanished. Her phone disconnected. Her social media wiped. The security company listed her as no longer employed. Jake paced in Cassandra's office, fury thrumming beneath his skin. "Where is she?" "I don't know," Cassandra admitted. "But if they silenced her." "They won't silence me." Jake's face was set. His shoulders squared. The haunted look in his eyes had hardened into something unbreakable. That night, he went back to Evergreen Point. He didn't sneak in. He walked through the front gate in broad daylight, holding a printed copy of the HOA emergency response policy. When security stopped him, he read it aloud. "To the residents of Evergreen Point," he said, voice steady, phone camera rolling, "this is the policy that killed Leonard Barnes. Your HOA chose paperwork over people. Bureaucracy over breath. I tried to save him. They tried to stop me." Residents peeked through blinds. Some stepped out onto porches. A few clapped. One woman wept quietly. Jake continued. "I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here for justice. If you don't want to be complicit, speak up. Ask for the tapes. Ask what they're hiding. Demand better." The video went viral by morning. 500,000 views. Then 1 million. Then 3. News outlets picked it up. Protesters formed outside Evergreen Point, holding signs that read "First responders over rules and let them breathe." The pressure was too much. The DA opened a criminal investigation. And Leah resurfaced. Safely. She'd fled to her sister's place in another state. A journalist helped get her protection. Her testimony was recorded. Sealed. Immutable. Jake sat beside Cassandra in a courthouse hallway a week later, watching as HOA attorneys filtered past, pale and grim. "You ever think it'd go this far?" he asked. She smirked. "I was hoping it would." He chuckled. Then, quieter, "Thank you for standing with me." Her reply was simple. "I didn't stand with you, Jake. I stood behind you. You were always leading this." In that moment, he didn't feel like a paramedic, or a victim, or a man fighting a machine too big to break. He felt human. Resilient. Whole. And the war wasn't over. But the tide was turning. Rain slicked the courthouse steps as Jake ascended them, the world around him a blur of umbrellas, camera flashes, and murmured speculation. He wasn't dressed like a martyr or a savior, just a man in a gray suit with creases he couldn't quite iron out and shoes a shade too worn for national TV. But his eyes, unwavering and steel-sharp, told another story. Beside him, Cassandra adjusted the collar of her coat and handed him a thick folder. "Their legal team will expect us to play defense," she said. "They still think we're just trying to survive this. We're not." She shook her head. "Not anymore. Today, we go on the offensive." Inside, the courtroom hummed with restrained tension. The HOA's legal team sat like a black tide on the far side, 12 bodies deep, suited and silent, waiting for blood. Across the aisle, it was just Jake, Cassandra, and a worn-out public defender from Leah's witness protection detail. The judge entered. The room stood. The storm outside had nothing on what was coming. Cassandra moved first. "Your Honor, we respectfully submit a motion to expand the charges against the Evergreen Point Homeowners Association to include conspiracy to obstruct emergency response and willful endangerment of public welfare." A murmur rippled across the courtroom. The HOA's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Proctor Hammond, rose with mock calm. "Your Honor, this is a transparent stunt. The defense is attempting to shift focus with theatrical accusations that bear no basis in." On the contrary, Cassandra cut in smoothly, "We submit Exhibit A, sworn testimony and authenticated security logs showing direct communication between Evergreen Point's board members and private security contractors, specifically instructing them to delay emergency responders until board approval could be obtained, even in cases of imminent medical collapse." She handed over the packet. Jake watched as the judge's expression shifted. Not surprise, judges rarely showed that. But interest. Deep, dangerous interest. Hammond stiffened. "This evidence is unverified. It was vetted by both the district attorney's office and the state health commission," Cassandra replied. "And it aligns precisely with the timeline of Leonard Barnes' death." The judge spoke. "I'll allow it. Continue." From there, the tone of the trial shifted, tectonically. What had once been a case about trespassing and defamation was unraveling into something bigger. Meaner. Criminal. But that wasn't the real counterattack. That came 3 days later, when Cassandra brought in a different kind of witness, Jacob Lorry, a former Evergreen board member who had resigned 6 months prior under personal circumstances. He walked in nervous, sweat beading along his forehead, collar too tight. But when he spoke, his voice was solid. "I didn't agree with the policy," Lorry said, eyes locked on the jury. "I told them. Repeatedly. But the board insisted, it was about maintaining control, not safety. They were terrified of lawsuits from residents, so they erred on the side of inaction. Even when that meant death." Jake felt a pressure lift from his chest. Someone inside had finally admitted it. And did the board act to suppress this information? Cassandra asked. Lori nodded. They threatened me. Implied financial ruin if I went public. Sent letters to potential employers. Blackballed me from every housing association job in the tri-state area. The jury looked sickened. Jake glanced at Hammond. For the first time, the man didn't look composed. He looked cornered. After court recessed, Cassandra pulled Jake aside. There's one more piece, she said, her voice low. The financials. He raised an eyebrow. They cooked the books? Worse. They had an illegal kickback scheme with a private ambulance company. The delay protocol? It wasn't just about control. It was profit-driven. The longer the delay, the higher the bill when residents were finally allowed treatment. Evergreen Point got a cut of every inflated invoice. Jake stood silent for a moment. Then he said, "Burn them to the ground." And Cassandra did. She filed a sweeping amended complaint that outlined the kickbacks, citing shell companies and signed contracts, all dug up by an anonymous forensic accountant who had reached out after the case went viral. Whistleblowers were appearing faster now. Each one chipping away at the HOA's already shredded credibility. By the start of the next week, the state attorney general had joined the case. Protests outside the courthouse swelled. Not just Evergreen residents now, but paramedics, nurses, teachers, firefighters. People who knew what it meant to be blocked from doing their jobs by bureaucracy wielded like a cudgel. Then came the moment Jake had waited for. Hammond requested a private negotiation. In a back chamber lined with law books, the old man stared at Cassandra and Jake across the polished oak table. "You want a settlement," he said. "We'll offer one. Generous. Walk away, drop the charges, and you'll never work another day in your life." Jake leaned forward. "Tell that to Leonard Barnes." Hammond hesitated. "What do you want?" Cassandra spoke. "Full confession. Public. No NDAs. Complete dissolution of the Evergreen Point HOA board, permanent disbarment from any future association governance, and a community fund paid out of their personal assets to cover medical emergencies for all residents, in perpetuity." The lawyer sneered. "You're out of your mind." Jake met his gaze. "We've got nothing to lose. But you? You're bleeding public trust, losing clients, and the AG circling. Settle now, or we take this all the way to a criminal jury." Hammond said nothing for a long time. Then he folded. The next morning, a stunned courtroom watched as the Evergreen board submitted full written confessions, dissolving their positions, and accepted all terms. The media exploded. Every channel ran Jake's story. Cassandra gave exactly one interview, then vanished from public view. Jake didn't return to the field right away. He needed time. Time to breathe, to think, to shed the adrenaline that had carried him through the fight. But the world didn't forget. Hospitals called. Community centers. Fire departments. He was invited to speak on panels about emergency access policy, reform, and ethics. He said yes to most of them. Not because he liked the spotlight, but because someone needed to say it, out loud, in every room that would listen. No one should die because a gate won't open. And as far as Jake Morales was concerned, that was the beginning, not the end.